Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing The Warriors Come Out to Play by the OP. The Warriors Come Out to Play is a cooperative deck building experience in which a hand building experience in which you're going to be pushing your luck, taking down baddies. It is officially a 2 to 4 player game, although practically speaking I see no reason why you can't play it as a pure solo game, so just note for that, box says 2 to 4. I think you can do 1 to 4. But in this game, you're going to be playing as the Warriors. This is based on the movie. I have never seen the movie, for disclaimer. I don't know any, I know the general plot of it, but that's basically it. This is based on the movie, and you're going to be taking on the control of these characters as you wander slowly but surely until you get to the final showdown at Coney Island. In the game, you're going to be moving 2 spots on the board, and depending on what the spot is doing, you are either building up your characters in some way, shape, or form, or alternatively, you are engaging in a fight. Those are generally the 2 things you're doing. You're either building and preparing, or fighting in the game. You see, across the course of the game, you're going to engage in a variety of fights, showdowns as it were, against the various gangs, all of which will result in their marker being moved higher and up the track, so you can eventually be highest on that reputation track over there, because otherwise, if you ever get to the end of the reputation track, you lose. If you ever get bumped off to the end, that's going to be one of the ways you lose the game. You're trying to move along these tracks, trying to build up, gather more weapon cards, gather more of these gang cards in general that you can add to your hand, and use all those in an attempt to take down baddies in fights. You see, a fight in this game consists of the following. In a fight, you're basically trying to cover symbols. You're trying to cover the symbols on the actual gang, then you have the location as well. So different locations will have different symbols on them you have to be mindful of, as will different gangs, and the combination of the gang and the symbols will give you the specifics you're trying to accomplish. But in a fight, what you're going to be doing is, again, you have to cover both of these. So you have to cover these up here, plus symbols down here equal to the number of players. So you have to be mindful of that as you go through this. But for example, I can go ahead right now and I can cash in my switchblade. If we were in a fight right now, I can cash in my switchblade, flip it over face over, in order to go ahead and put down a token on this switchblade symbol, which requires either a bat or a switchblade. Our teammate over here can also go ahead and do the same thing on her turn to go ahead and cover one of these. It's worth noting, generally for choosing characters, you do want to mix up their starting weapons a bit. I didn't for the sake of this. But either way, from there you're going to go ahead and play cards to cover specific things, and you need to make sure you win or you'll eventually lose from the fight and lose reputation accordingly. So for example, I can play this card over here to roll 2 dice. I'm going to go ahead and do so. I'm going to discard this card. I'll roll 2 dice, which shows in the corner, and I got a 3 and a 4. Now the good news is I'm going to use that 4 to cover this. We are good to go. You can actually use, the marker to cover that, put the dice back, and then from there we're going to go back to our teammate's turn, and she has the opportunity to cover that, and this is where you're going to start trying to figure out. She doesn't have any 2 dice cards right now, so she'll go ahead and she'll play. Let's see what we can do over here. She already used her switchblade. Otherwise, this card would let you use a switchblade to roll 2 dice instead of 1. Rolling a single die hoping for a 4 is a tough one. We're going to go ahead, we have throw hands, so we might use throw hands, but we're just going to go ahead and use streetwise. We're going to discard streetwise. We're going to roll a single die. And we got a 1, which is not good. Not good, unfortunately, because you see, I could have used throw hands to, when you roll, you may discard this from your hand to add 1 to a die, then remove this card from the game. I have a few of those. I guess I could use all 3 throw hands to be able to move this to a 4, which I'm going to do for the sake of this example over here, just so we can go ahead and, ta-da, we've now covered that card. That's basically the fighting in a game. The fighting is a combination of rolling dice and then using card abilities to manipulate dice, and or using weapons to cover specific areas, at which point you go on to the next location. Throughout the course of the game, the things you're doing to build up, to improve, is you're going to be moving to location, sometimes building things up, or alternatively resting, where you'll pull back your hand and discard a card from the game. But alternatively, you're doing other things, such as going to these locations over here, where you'll draw one of these cards from this row, adding it to your hand, and then draw another card to replace it. You'll have weapon spots, where you can go ahead and grab a weapon, although you are limited to only 2 weapons, so you need to factor that in. You're going to have other spots that will let you pull back a card from the discard card, but you also have to be mindful of the fact that all these spots have different events happening, where you can be drawing cards from this little deck over here, that whenever you go to a spot, either 1 on this spot or 2 on a dangerous spot, you're going to be drawing cards from here, and whenever you get 3 events, that's 2 events right now, that's 2 threats. If you get a 3rd threat, you're going to have additional fights. So there's an additional element of some of these cards represent all clear and you're totally fine, but once you build up 3 threats, you're going to have additional fights you have to be mindful of, and you're constantly going through that cycle trying to be mindful of your hand. This entire game is a hand management game. It's all about trying to maintain your hand as you get to hopefully making it stronger and stronger as you go across multiple fights, trying to move from borough to borough, eventually having your final showdown in Coney Island against the Coney Island location, where hopefully you are all prepped and ready to go, because that one has the most symbols that need to be covered from all the other, from all the cards in the game. And that's basically the Warrior. The Warriors. That's basically the Warriors. It's a game about hand management, of adding more weapons and cards to your hands, of trying to mitigate and go through a degree of push your luck, a degree of trying to figure out where you have the opportunity to actually win, sometimes even possibly backing down from fights entirely, rather than wasting precious resources on the fight, but taking a hit to your reputation accordingly as you go through the experience in an attempt to win this game by the final showdown. Which brings us to a review, starting off with ease of play. Rulebook's pretty short to go through. It's, a handful of pages as far as what's going on here. For the most part, it's fairly simple. The concepts here are not crazy or hard to understand. So it's got like some length to it, but it's a fairly easy game to understand, to teach, to play. Game plays in roughly 40 minutes or so. The box says, I wonder if the box says. I don't know what the box says, but roughly 40 minutes or so for the game based on my experience with it so far. As far as what I like, don't like, I can see others not liking. First of all, as far as what I like, the game keeps you moving. The game is constantly moving you forward. You have this track down over here, and you're trying to move, you're not trying to, you have to effectively move all the way to the end. How you move to the end, how quickly you move to the end, what stops you stop at, where you're going to have more fights, where you're going to build up your deck. There is a game of, it's constantly keeping you moving. It's constantly keeping you pushing forward towards that end game. The game, like I said already, runs around 30-40 minutes. It's a quick moving game, and it has a degree of push your luck. It has a degree of hand management. It has a degree of comboing certain characters. You can combo a character, like right now in front of me, I have these two characters who one has a lot more dice and hitting, the other one lets him pull back cards, making him a better fighter, so it's almost a support and whatnot. And so there are different characters, and the characters you don't use, you're going to shuffle those into the general pool, so all their cards are kind of in play, so you have the opportunity to both have special characters which have their own unique advantages, but also to build out the characters towards your playstyle by going through those cards. The weapons also give you a degree of predictability in the game, whether you're using them for certain locations, but you can't always guarantee which locations and which gangs will have those symbols on them, but you can also use them to power some of your own cards as well, so you have lots of opportunities. And then the Molotov cocktails are completely wild in the game, although they are one use, but they could be very helpful in a pinch, covering whatever thing you need to cover. So there's a lot of just general building up and preparation for the fight as you go through the game. There's good hand management, there's good moving forward, but as far as the things I don't like, it didn't really feel that difficult or challenging. And it didn't feel like there was a ton of agency in the decisions you were making. There's hand management, there's decisions, there's cards that play off one another, but the game kind of feels very much on rails because it kind of is very much on rails, and the sense, there's not a lot of decision making in the game. The most decisions come down to the hand management and which spots you want to stop off or not, and how many fights you can afford to risk or not. It really moves you forward on rails in a way that, while it keeps the game moving quickly, takes away from some of the potential options as far as what you can actually do. You're going through a sequence of fights, you're playing cards to the best of your ability, you're trying to win them all, and then that's it. You get to the end. And then it kind of feels too repetitive as well. The fights feel repetitive. It's not long, which is a good thing, but the fights are just very repetitive. It's the same core cycle again and again and again. Nothing's really mixing it up. There's no escalation to the game state. It's the same use of a handful of cards and trying to use them as efficiently as possible on the first fight and on the last fight. The last fight has a few more symbols, so it's a little bit more work, but it's the same core concept throughout the game. The deck building you have on the game doesn't really feel different, it just feels like more. So you have a little more cards coming in, maybe mixing them with some other characters you're not using, but it doesn't really feel different, it just feels like more. As far as I can see others not liking, ultimately, there's a lot of dice rolling in this game as well. In addition to everything I said, the game often does come down to go ahead and roll that die. I'm rolling pretty poorly today, but there we go. Just go ahead and roll the die, assign it to a number that you can, and that's the game state. It's not a ton of, again, the decisions are around the hand management. The rest of it comes down to a healthy dose of luck mixed into that experience. As far as final thoughts on the Warriors, this is an okay game to me. I'm not a fan of the IP, meaning not a fan of the IP, I just don't know the IP. I never really watched the movie, so I have no attachment to the characters, and the game itself feels fairly procedural. It's totally fine. It was a fun experience to go through. It's not bad. You can go through this, you can go through it a few times, but it gets very samey game after game. It's a game that you get bored of. For me, after the second game, I'm already feeling a little bit like, I don't know why I need to keep going with this one. It's a totally fine experience that gives you hand management, it gives it to you in a short playtime, and it gives you some degree of fun as you build things up, but without a lot of decision making along the way. For me, this is a 3 out of 5. It is totally fine, totally passable, totally acceptable, but I also just don't need to play it again. As far as other game recommendations, if you're looking for other recommendations, first of all, if you want more co-op actual deck building, Aeon Zen is going to be a fantastic line of games with a ton of deck building baked into it. And if you want something a little more gang themed, this isn't actually out yet, but it's one that I had a chance to play, and I do recommend keeping your eyes peeled for when it is out. But 5 Wards, that's W-A-R-D-S, 5 Wards, that was a very solid experience that I'm looking forward to when that does launch on crowdfunding sometime in 2023. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.